Everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started as it is the top of the hour. So I'm going to share my screen here and start our slideshow. So our presentation today is about re-engaging non-participating students. And I want to call attention to the graphics on this slide. So as faculty, right, if we have a student as shown on the left who looks like she's kind of confused, right, we want that student to be able to reach their goal of the student depicted on the right, the graduate. And so everything that we do as faculty is towards that aim. And so re-engaging non-participating students is one way that we as faculty can help students reach that goal. So presenters today will be myself, Chava Myman, instructional designer and Canvas admin for John Tyler Community College. And then we also have Jim Shiflett, who is an ed tech specialist, LMS administrator at Piedmont. Some housekeeping aspects. This webinar will be recorded, and both the recording and the slide deck will be available on the EdTech webinars page by the end of the week. There is a link right here to that page so that when you get the slide deck, you'll have reference to this if needed. Now, please post your questions as you have them to the Q&A area at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a little graphic here to show you what that button looks like. There are multiple facilitators who will be responding to your questions. Also, please note that while federal guidelines do not yet require re-engagement attempts for face-to-face classes, we do encourage you to follow practices that we'll be discussing in this webinar for all modalities, not just online, etc. So our agenda today will be, again, ways of preventing non-participation so that you don't even have to get to the re-engagement process. But then next, we will discuss the re-engagement process that does very commonly happen. And then finally, the how-to. So the last part of the webinar today will really be more hands-on and a workshop. So feel free to open up Canvas. Jim will be showing you a variety of tools in Canvas that can be helpful. So this is a quote: every student who stops attending and no one reaches out is one who has given up, as well as one who's been given up on. And of course, as faculty, that is the last thing that we want to do, is give up on our students and have our students give up on themselves. So in this webinar, again, through the re-engagement process, we are trying to help students not give up on themselves, right? And for us to not give up on them. So part one is going to be the who, what, when, where, and why. Specifically, of course, we are talking about students who have not participated or have stopped participating, as well as those who haven't even gotten to that point and how we can help them not reach that point. In terms of what, right, is our focus is re-engagement. When is when the student has stopped participating. Where, we'll talk about a variety of methods, how you can reach out. And why, of course, again, as we spoke about, is to try and help the student succeed as much as we can. So this is an actual quote from a student that we wanted to share. I have never met a teacher that was so eager for me to strive. You are very motivating. And I want to focus on the term motivating. So number one, the fact that some students, right, many students may not say anything about all of our extra efforts that we go towards to try and help them succeed, but some students do. And it's really wonderful when that happens, because then as faculty, it feels like our efforts are paying off and we're actually doing something. And by doing things such as trying to re-engage our students, trying to do things that will avoid the re-engagement process from being necessary, that sort of thing, that helps our students feel more motivated to take the class and keep up with the coursework, etc. So key points for the federal guidelines related to re-engaging students: pursuing re-engagement after missed due dates until the student re-engages regularly or is dropped or withdraws themselves. Also, documenting your re-engagement attempts. So not only trying to re-engage students, and we'll talk about those methods, but also documenting your attempts. And then just a note down here that while your responsibility should end once you have attempted, right, and you have documented it, we do encourage you to continue reaching out to the student. And we will also talk about different methods, so ones that are more personal, ones that may involve others at the college as well. So again, we're starting with how can I prevent non-participation? And I'd like you to consider yourself as the student, right? Kind of flipping things around. If you were the student, what would you hope for from your instructor? So you might hope that the instructor provides their contact information, right? If I have a question, even if I'm doing well, but I have a question, how can I contact my instructor? We want to make sure that our contact information is very clear to students. We might hope as a student that the instructor would reach out if, again, there was some issue that became apparent, or if we were doing really well. So not only when there's an issue, but also if we're really succeeding as students, I, as a student, might want my instructor to recognize that and reach out to me about it. Giving grading feedback. So if there's an assignment and the grade is low, right, the student might not really understand why that grade is low. So maybe the student would probably hope that the instructor would give some detailed feedback on what they could do better next time, perhaps what they can do to repeat the assignment if that is applicable, that sort of thing. Right? And responding. So we just spoke about the instructor reaching out to the student, but also if the student reaches out to the instructor, students are likely going to hope that the instructor reaches back out. And these are all just really important aspects that we're going to delve into more detail. And the last thing is knowing the student's preferred name, their preferred pronoun. And so, for example, if you have an introduce yourself discussion board at the beginning of your course, you might want to consider including a question for the students. Please let me know what your preferred name is. Maybe it's different from what's on the roster. If you have a preferred pronoun, right? That sort of thing. So that then when you're grading, you can address that student personally, correctly, right? According to what they prefer. How can I prevent non-participation? So continuing with that, under communication. So contact information, we just spoke about that. If you have your contact information posted in multiple places, the students are more likely to be able to find it, right? It might make sense to just have it in one place, but we never know where students are going to go to try and find things. And so having that information in multiple places is more likely to succeed in terms of the students reaching out to you when needed, et cetera. So these locations might include announcements, a faculty information page, even in your grading comments, right? Other places perhaps, and providing support opportunities. So letting the student know what your email address is, what your office hours are, any Zoom rooms. So perhaps that's going to also be office hours or other meetings. Grading comments. So encouraging your students to reach out with questions and providing that detailed feedback. Now, there's a note here, right, that detailed feedback may include video or audio. And so Canvas does have a very nice feature in SpeedGrader that does allow you to not only have text-based feedback, but also video or audio. And depending on the class that you teach, the multimedia options may be even more helpful to the student than text. So a personal example on that, my field is graphic design. And so the classes that I've taught are really design-based, project-based, tool-based. And so in some cases, if it seemed that a student needed to use a particular tool and I felt like if I just write it out, they're not going to get it. But if I go in the program and I actually show them briefly, right? We're not talking a long video, but briefly, here's the tool, here's maybe how to use it. Here's this part of the assignment that would need to be redone, etc. Right? So a short video can go a long way. And I have received good feedback from students when using that. So depending on the situation, depending on the type of class or depending on the type of assignment, that may be helpful to you. And if nothing else, it does form a bigger connection, especially with online classes, but all modalities, because the student can see you. So here's another quote, right? Thank you so much for the feedback on the assignments. Your feedback really helped. Again, sometimes it takes time to do that detailed feedback. It doesn't take just a second. And so when you get comments from students like this, for us as instructors, it's also motivating, right? It helps us realize that the students really do appreciate it, and we are helping them. We are making a difference that way. So continuing on, communication, right? We spoke about kudos messages just briefly. So let's say you have a student who is really succeeding in the class, or perhaps you have a student who is failing, but brought themselves up. So either way, consider sending a kudos message. Very short, right? Hi, Jane, just want to give you kudos for starting out great in our class, right? So a personal message, you're addressing the student personally, you're giving your own, signature. So just very brief. But those are two situations to consider with that. I do want to mention, though, particular guidelines on when you might want to do that. So let's say you have 5 classes, right? You're teaching a lot of students, and hopefully you have a lot of students who are succeeding. So it might feel a little overwhelming to feel like you need to be sending a personal message to each of those students. So think about what success means to you, right? Maybe it's a certain grade level, like, a 90 or a 95 or above, you only send to those students. Or again, you're probably not going to have that many students, who, let's say, weren't doing well, but have brought themselves up. So that would be a particular situation. And so, kind of having those guidelines for yourself, the students are just going to have a nice surprise when they see it. Can help it make it seem a little less overwhelming for you as the instructor. Replying to messages within 24 to 48 hours. So that timely feedback, responding to students, addressing students personally. Again, we've mentioned that already, and using their preferred name and pronoun. And also, this is something that I have found. And so some of you may have found this with your students, some of you may not. But sometimes a student may say that, I'm reaching out, right? And that's excellent. But they're a little nervous about it. Like they feel like their question is maybe silly, or they should know it, right? So always, if a student did that, what I would reply back or start with is, any questions are welcome. It's all part of the process, etc. And so that way you're helping the student from the beginning who might say that feel comfortable in confiding with you about their issues with the class, whatever it is. Right, so using announcements at the beginning of the course, right, here are some ideas for how you can use announcements. Familiarizing students with campus resources, right? So tutoring is one example of that, but it could be many other things. And this really sends a message to your students that not only are you concerned with them being successful in your course, but also all the courses that they're taking, because these campus resources will apply to everything. I've even sent an announcement, especially during COVID when it was starting last year, of resources that could help them if they were, having financial issues. And I had a student respond back that, she thought it was, she appreciated the fact that that was posted. That had nothing to do with the course, but it showed that care for the student. So there are all types of ways you can use announcements. Other ideas here, more course related, is demonstrating how to set Canvas preferences. Jim is going to be talking with us about that later on in the webinar. Reminding your students to check their email or their Canvas inbox, right? So in your faculty information page or other places definitely encourage you to make your communication plan clear. When you're going to respond, where they should send messages, even your grading timeline, right? What the turnaround time is that they should receive grades, that sort of thing. And then again, you can remind your students, if the primary way you're going to talk to them is through Canvas inbox, right? They need to be checking that sort of thing. More on announcements. So an overview of the upcoming week. What I've done for my classes is done an overview of the week in an announcement, and then also included a video. This was done at the same time every week, so students really could expect it. This is also part of RSI in terms of being predictable. And that video, again, builds a rapport between the instructor and the student. Reminders of when homework is due. And at the end of the week, you could consider wishing students a good weekend with a fun or inspirational video, a graphic, animated GIF. So there's a site called Giphy, Giphy, which is really awesome, recommended, and it is linked in this slide here. And you can get some great animated GIFs there. And you can also do other things. So for example, if you want to target your announcements to be substantive, which is also part of RSI, right? We want it to be an announcement that helps students further succeed in the course skill-wise and is related to content. So for example, you could have an announcement on a game, right? So let's say something fun, but it's a way for them to practice something that's being taught that week, for example. Or even something even more fun, like one time I've done an announcement regarding a television program on Netflix that was very much related to the content. So again, in a very fun way, they increase their knowledge. So another quote, I really enjoyed the weekly videos that provide a leaping off point. So again, that goes back to those announcements that have an overview of the week and include a video that goes through the homework, any potential pitfalls that you as the instructor typically see from students, that sort of thing. And here are a couple of examples, right? So at the end of the week, right, you give them a beautiful Giphy over here, or just a reminder that homework is due. So let's continue here. So more with announcements. Here's a specific scenario, again, that's really related to the content. So let's say you have a discussion board every week where the students talk about that week's content, talk about any problems they're having with the homework as they are doing it during the week. And so that's a really good thing. If you find that, let's say, multiple students are having trouble with some specific aspect, an announcement could be helpful for that. So you send out an announcement to the whole class addressing the confusion. You might include an image or a demo video, whatever it is, to provide the solution. Encourage students, who might still have questions, to contact you. But I do want to also make a note that in such a situation, in such a discussion board, you would also very much want to address the students' questions personally, in addition to sending that announcement that might be going out to students who don't even have an issue yet. with that particular aspect of the homework. Another suggestion is to assign an assessment early in the semester that alerts you to the potential need for resources on campus, such as tutoring. And in this way, this is our segue into the actual non-participation aspect, but it does help prevent non-participation, because if you know early on that there might be a problem, you can try and find ways to avoid it from escalating. So in an English class, for example, it might be a short paper, but I would encourage that it be low stakes, meaning it's a practice. It's not this high stakes, huge assignment that's going to, really lower their course grade, but just something that is graded, maybe not so many points, maybe even a group project, but a chance for them to practice that's not going to adversely affect their course grade, but will alert you to a potential issue, maybe the need for extra tutoring, that sort of thing. So here are some ideas for referrals on campus. So advising or financial aid. You may very well have had students who are struggling in class simply because they have too much on their plate. And so if possible, right, it might even be a question of them dropping one or more classes. And so they might need to speak to some departments about that. Dean of Students, emergency funds, right? So you may have had students who had mental health issues. Perhaps they are having financial issues that have gone really extreme. So homelessness, that sort of thing. There are all types of situations, as I'm sure you all have experienced also, that can come up. Tutoring, we talked about that before. And then the safe zone. So a student who is within the LGBTQ community might need support and just be struggling in class for that reason. All right, so these are all things we can do to try and help prevent participation, but it's incredibly common that a student will stop participating. So what do we do at this point? So the first recommendation would be to put a 0 in SpeedGrader, right, in the grade book, and that alerts the student, right? It might affect their course grade. Whoa, what happened here? Or even if it doesn't, it is an alert. Maybe they forgot to do the assignment. And in addition to that, including a customized grading comment. So Jim is going to be discussing this also, but we have SpeedGrader comments, which is a newer feature, and that can be helpful in terms of keeping a template that you can then personalize, right? Dear student name, sorry, I didn't see this assignment, etc. Right? So here's an example right here. Sorry not to see this submitted. Any challenges come up, please let me know how I can help, right? The instructor's name and the contact information. So again, you're addressing the student personally, you're expressing, nicely that you're sorry not to see it, what happened, encouraging them to reach out to you and providing your contact information. So you've already reached out to them in this way. And then especially if we're talking about a large assignment that really does have a great deal of weight, an additional step, and this is good just in general, but an additional step is to message the student personally outside of the grading feedback. So this could be through email or the Canvas inbox, message students who, which Jim will talk about. So remember in your message to be caring, right, encouraging, and respectful. New analytics, which Jim will also be talking about, can help you determine which students need assistance so that you don't have to really be manually trying to figure out if there's anyone you need to be reaching out to. It's not always readily apparent, especially if you have large classes. So those features can help you out that way. There are links also for all of these features listed here, so that you can, when you do have the slide deck, can have that for reference. All right, so here's an example of a personal message, right? Again, addressing the student and again, expressing that you're sorry you didn't see the assignment submitted, right? Maybe it's, let's say, the whole week went by and they didn't submit anything, right? Again, encouraging the student to reach out and giving them options. So I found this to be really helpful, right? Sometimes students, they don't just want to do the email. They want to talk to you. They want to, they want to see you. So meeting by Zoom, one-on-one can be really helpful. And then again, right, looking forward to discussing further. So you're keeping up that positive tone. Okay, so one thing that I did want to mention also is each institution, will have guidance on the preferred method of documenting your re-engagement efforts. So we're just providing one example, which is Navigate, that we're going to discuss now. But again, speak with your institution. So if you use Navigate, one suggestion is to note its use in the syllabus so that students know to expect it. These messages may go beyond you and the instructor. They may also be sent to other college personnel who have a need to know and can assist with trying to re-engage the student. So, it would, I would encourage that you note its use in the syllabus for that reason. Navigate can be accessed through the VCCS portal after logging in, right on your applications area. So let's say the student responded, right? Great. So in your reply, again, be encouraging, right? Thanks for reaching out. I'm so glad to hear from you. Even if it was like, a week after you tried to reach out to them, at least they're responding. On the other hand, we do, of course, want the students to understand that they are accountable for doing the work, right? We're going to try and help them succeed, but we need them to do their part too. So here are some ideas, right? Asking the student for a firm deadline on submitting the missing work that is realistic for them, right? So if you give the deadline, they could complain afterwards that there wasn't enough time for them to resubmit it, etc. But if you have noted in writing that they said, oh, I can do it by tomorrow night, right, then you can hold them to it. So being clear that the agreed upon deadline is missed, the grade will stand, right, if it's missed, and that going forward, the work will need to be turned in on time. So you, again, can say, right, that this contract just is for one time. And then there's also just a note here to include your late policy in your syllabus. Okay, so this is another actual quote from a student, right? I could never have kept up without all your help and following up. So, with this comment, I just want to note that, as faculty, we have this constant balance of trying to help our students succeed, trying to re-engage them being one aspect of that. And also making sure that they are doing their part. So it's it can be a delicate balance, but again, as you can see from this, right, the student was not given up on and the student didn't give up. And so that's what we're going for. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim in just a minute here. At this point, we're going to have more of our how aspect, right? Getting into Canvas itself, and Jim will show you some great tools. So those tools will include Canvas settings and notifications, right? You want to make sure that your students are actually getting your messages. So, you could be sending them out, but maybe they're just not getting them because they don't have their preferences set up right. Again, we can only tell them and hope they listen, but that is definitely something that would be important to do. New analytics, as we mentioned before, right? Message students who is really helpful so that you can kind of target your messages to students who missed a certain assignment, whatever the case is. And there are also reports that you can run that can help yourself as well. Jim is also going to talk about aspects of the gradebook like the speed grader comments, the Canvas inbox, and the Canvas community. Also wanted to just note before I turn it over that here are some screenshots. And so, you know, Canvas settings, right? Notifications, some screenshots, multiple screenshots about new analytics. So just to give you a preview and also let you know that you'll have these references in the slide deck when you get that slide deck. Again, that's going to be on the EdTech webinars page. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Jim now.
Thank you, Hava. Good evening. I'm going to demonstrate how to set up some of these features in Canvas. So I want to start with something foundational, which is how to set preferred email addresses and notification settings. This is also, I would recommend doing this as a video for your students as well, maybe even walking them through how to do it. One of the common misconceptions I see is that people think the Canvas inbox is a direct email, and it's not. The messages contained inside Canvas unless they're forwarded to a preferred email address. So as Hava mentioned, you and the student, you could both be making good faith efforts to communicate with one another, but the way Canvas is set up, you may be crossing wires and never have a clear channel of communication. So I want to make sure we address that first. So to do so, we're going to go to our Canvas dashboard, click on your account, and then settings. So your email address and contact is going to default to your institutional email. If that is the one you check, that's great. If you tend to check a personal email more often, you can add that one here. So let's say that I want to send things to my VCCS Gmail, for example. I can do so here. Then you would confirm the email through, it's going to send you an email confirmation. You confirm it, and then you can also star which addresses you want to favorite. So once we have our email addresses, the next step is to go over to notifications, which is in the same area here. So there are two that I always recommend setting to be immediate notifications. So you see these little bell icons here. We can flip through these and say, notify immediately, daily summary, weekly summary, or completely turn the notification off. The two that I recommend you turn on for immediate would be announcements, and announcements created by you in case you have a TA or someone who has announcement permissions in your course. And the reason is if students respond to an announcement, you have a record that you've sent the announcement and they've replied to it. Then the other important one is this whole section on conversations. So Canvas doesn't make it immediately obvious, but conversations are the inbox messages. So I would check all these to be immediate notifications. So if you create a Canvas inbox message and it gets a reply, you want to make sure that is sent to your email right away, that you don't have to go into Canvas and check it. Okay, so once you have these set up, you can now use the inbox almost like an email server. So we can choose our course, and now we can write messages to our students. All right, so the next step I want to show you is so let's say we're in the actual course, and you want to keep track of, if students are logging in, if they're participating, how active are they? So there's a few methods, and I like to use the People tab and New Analytics to triangulate what people are doing in the class. So if you go to People, this is going to give you the most current information. So you can see that we have people logging in today. I just logged in a few minutes ago. So this is the most current activity. And this gives you a sense of total activity in the course as well. So a student who's been logged in multiple hours versus just a few minutes will give you a good clue of who we need to keep on our radar. The other thing you can do is click in the top right on the settings menu here and choose Student Interactions Report. And this is going to bring up a list of your students, their grades, This is kind of your to-do list, any ungraded assignments you have to take a look at. And then this icon right here will take you right to the Canvas inbox, and you can message them from the screen. So if you see there's a problem with somebody's participation, you can just click on the message and you can come right back to Canvas inbox. So the one thing about the People tab, it does not take into account mobile logins. So if your students are logging in on their cell phones to the Canvas mobile app, the People tab doesn't always register that. That's not the most accurate information. For a more accurate picture of what students are doing, as well as a more comprehensive view of what they're doing, excuse me, you want to click on New Analytics. So you can see we have New Analytics here in the, you can either enable it as a navigation item, in which case students can't see it, but it's also always available on the very far right column near the bottom. So New Analytics. And this is going to bring up kind of an overwhelming graphic menu. It seems a little intimidating, but it's I'm going to show you how to click on the various tabs up here to find some really useful information. So this will show the average course grade. I find this tab is really useful. This is weekly online activity. So these little points represent data points. So this is the total number of participations and page views. And I think it's broken down by week. Yeah, so August 1, August 8th. Clicking on this data point brings up this pop-up menu. And now we can see both resources and students. So we can see that we have a homepage and we have some various things that students were meant to look at. We can also see who looked at them and who did not, and then who did not participate. So if we click on these numbers right here, we can see that, you know, we have some students who did not view. Let's say, I want everybody to take a look at the homepage. So we have 3 students who did not look at the homepage. This might be useful if you have your course syllabus as a required. I want you to take a look at the syllabus and, you know, let me know if you have any questions. Maybe it doesn't count for a grade, but you do want to check to see if students read and understood it. So you can use this did not view data point right here, and you can message students, you know, saying, you know, hey, don't forget to check the syllabus. So, and it's going to send a blind copy to everybody on that list. Same thing with any assignments that are missing. So if you have, so you can see we have 5 who didn't participate this week. So we need to make sure we get them caught up. So they did not participate in this, like a discussion forum or something. So we want to make sure we send them a nudge to make sure they do it. So that's very helpful. The next tab over is students. So we can also click on a student. I'm going to pick on Terry, and then we can see what Terry's been up to. So it looks like not much. So we have no activity. And then if you've been sending inbox messages through Canvas, it will keep a record here of how many were sent versus how many were received. It doesn't give you details about what was said, but it will show a good faith effort on your part to reach out to the student, and if they responded, if you need to provide that for any auditing purposes. You can also download it as a CSV, and you can have a record of your interactions. And the other useful tab is on the reports. So you can download a missing assignments report or late assignments. And I like this feature because this is relatively new. You can run a class roster report. So if you want to send a direct email to your class without having to go to SIS to get your list of emails, you can run that report here. You can also filter by section in case you merge your classes, and then you can have a list of student emails for a more direct contact. So I want to take you next to the gradebook and talk about messaging students here and also entering zeros. So you can see that I've entered zeros here. I'm going to back up for just a minute. So I always recommend entering zeros as placeholders for the reason that If you don't do so, students may have a inflated sense of how well they're doing in the course, because Canvas treats these dashes as no grade. It does not count points against students if you have not put a 0 as a placeholder. If you have online assignments where you're accepting online submissions, you can click on the gear in the upper right, and you can set a default percentage to automatically apply once the due date has passed. So if the assignment was due last night at midnight and these students have not turned it in, we can apply 0 to their grade. You can also take off late penalties. So when they do turn the assignment in, if you want to take off 10% a day, you can set that as well. I think Canvas defaults to 100, just as an FYI. If you enable this feature, it will default to 100, so just make sure you change that to a 0. Not sure why 100 is the default. But you can see now we've got all of these spaces filled. So let's take a look at one of the assignments where nobody has, where a few students have not turned it in. If we click on the settings menu, we can also message students who have not yet submitted. So we can say, friendly reminder to turn this assignment in. And I'm not going to pick on Sherry because she's away. So send message. And we got a great question in the last webinar about where do students find feedback, because it always seems to be hidden. It's very likely your students are looking for your detailed feedback, and you probably have left very detailed feedback, but it's hidden in Canvas in a strange screen. So I want to show you how to get there. And then I would also recommend you show students how to get to the screen to see the detailed feedback you've left for them. So we click on the assignment. So we're going to click on Speed Grader. And you can see we can leave general comments here, but we can also leave point annotations. And let me explain what I mean by that. So let's say you've marked up a paper with a lot of these annotations and highlights and comments, etc. Unless students click on an extra button, they don't see these comments. They just see the general comments you've left for them, which may not be very specific. So to make sure they see the comments, what we need to do is, I'm going to show you the student view of what they would see. So they're going to go to grades. And they're going to see here that there's been some comments left, but they'll need to click on the assignment. And when on the assignment details, next to the file they've submitted, they'll see view feedback. This brings up a pop-up window with all those point annotations. So very important that students don't just go to the grades tab and look at the generalized feedback you've left. They actually need to click on each assignment and then click view feedback to see the more detailed feedback. And I also want to show you, so as Hava mentioned, you can add specialized, or you can add comments to your comment library. That's going to be all the way over here in the right corner. So you'll see the little speech bubble here. And you can see I already have one listed up here. So we can just say, hi, and we can make ourselves a template. So if we're never going to be using it multiple times over the semester, make a template, and then you can select it and then edit the template before you submit. So we can say, hi page, sorry this didn't get submitted, even though Paige did submit it. She just happens to be the one up here. Please reach out if you need to get caught up. And now we can submit that assignment or the comment. If you've turned on the show suggestions when typing, this is going to pop up anything that may match that wording in your comment library. So if you're always making comments about comma usage, for example, you can type in the few words, and then you can choose your comment from this screen here. And as Hava also mentioned, feedback does not always need to be typed out and text-based. You can also attach, let's say you did a markup and took a screenshot. You can attach this as a file here. You can do video feedback, or you can do audio feedback. This might be a good way to limit your workload. Instead of typing out very substantial feedback, you can just do a short speech over Canvas media and then upload that here. And I do want to show you one last thing before we go back to Hava into questions. Regarding Canvas help. So I wanted to show you the community guides in Canvas. If you have any questions about these features, you can always reach out to your various ed tech departments. But this could always be your first stop if you hit a wall, is if you go to your navigation menu here, at the bottom you'll see help. And then there's the ask the community. So this is the Canvas community guides. And then we can what I usually do is just type in a question. How do I use new analytics? And you may have to sift through, or how to use the gradebook. Okay. So you may have to search through some topics, but I find generally typing in the question is a good way to just pop up whatever Canvas has. These tend to be very comprehensive, well-written, with screenshots, troubleshooting. So, and Hava, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and I'll be happy to take some questions during Q&A.
Thanks so much, Jim. So I wanted to reiterate an important aspect that was discussed in the Q&A area. So with regard to announcements, I was talking a lot about announcements. And so I did want to mention that as was discussed in the Q&A, yes, you can absolutely schedule announcements. And I'm glad that that was discussed in the Q&A, because I did intend to discuss that. So yeah, I mean, you can set up your announcements and schedule them ahead of time for the entire semester. And I used to do that, absolutely, have your weekly overview announcement go out, maybe Monday morning or whatever it is. And then maybe at the end of the week, right, you have that inspirational announcement go out. Maybe you have something in between, reminders for homework, anything that you're going out weekly, and just go ahead and set it up and schedule it for the entire semester. So that is very important for sure, to make it easier on you. Also, Jim was talking about some great points regarding the recent feedback, and mentioning also, letting students know where to find it. So, an idea is in your assignments, right? So just consistently, maybe at the bottom, maybe you have like guidelines for the assignment at the bottom of the instructions. You can just say, I will be providing feedback, please look for it here, is an idea to let your students know and help them find it better. So just a couple of ideas there.
So there's a question from Sarah in the Q&A about how to forward emails to your personal email inbox. I'd be happy to show you that setup as well. So if you go to, I got so much stuff on the screen. If you go to your account, so in Canvas in the very far left, top left corner, click on account, click on settings. So on the very far right, you would add an email here. And then it shoots you an email to that address. You have to confirm that you want Canvas to send notifications there. But you can add institutional emails, you can add personal emails. You can also add, I'm not sure anybody would want to do this, but you can add text messages, although not every feature is supported through push notifications and text. So I'm trying to discourage students from using this where possible, because they're not going to get the full Canvas picture using mobile notifications. But once you have your NVCC email listed under here, the next step is to go to notifications. And every contact method you have that you have confirmed, so you would have multiple emails right here, you can set customized notification settings for each email address. So maybe you want to send weekly summaries to a personal email, but maybe send immediate notifications to your institutional email. Okay, and there's another question from Megan about how to get to message students who. So Terry is correct. The one method is from the gradebook. The other method is from New Analytics. So if you click on New Analytics on the very far right, here you'll click on weekly online activity.
Jim, can you share again?
Of course. I forget. All right, let me start over. Okay, so click on the course, click on New Analytics on the very far right. And then we're going to click on Weekly Online Activity. And then these data points will tell you so who might be worth checking up on. Students who didn't view a resource, didn't participate. So we can click on, these are kind of hidden links right here. It's not very obvious that these are clickable. We're going to click on the 3 who didn't view, and then we're going to message all those students with a friendly reminder saying, hey, don't forget to look at this resource. I believe you can also click on a student's name. So click on a student. I need to find that. There is a way to do it. So you can also message students by, all missing assignments, for example. So we have 4 students with various missing assignments. This might be a good way to kind of start working on that makeup work contract. And you can get that ball rolling here. I remember, sorry. So the other method for messaging students is from people. So you would click on people, click in the top right, the settings, student interactions report. And now we can message them directly from this screen right here. And it takes you to the inbox. So that would be the other method.
We have a few more minutes, so we're here. If you would like to have us show you anything else or discuss anything further, still within the Q&A.
Jim, do you want to take Jill's question? Since you were just in New Analytics.
Sure. Usually I click people from the Canvas menu and the student's name labeled access reports, which I find easy to read and see how students engaged are. Yeah, that's a great question. I use that as well to do like attendance audits. That's fairly accurate. Not sure about mobile app access. I think I have tested that before, and the logins did appear, and that is that's an easily readable format, the access report. I can show you what we're talking about if no one has seen this before. Terry, you mind if I pick on you?
Feel free.
Okay. So people. So you can also email directly from here and access new analytics as well. Forgot to mention that. So this would be Terry's access report and her interactions report in this class. Terry, you've not logged in, so this was not useful.
Sorry, I should have warned you.
And I just looked at that too. All right, I'm going to pick on Paige instead because Paige has logged in.
Go ahead, click on Paige. Paige has logged in.
You guys are kind of slackers who did not do these assignments. Paige, any chance you logged in with the phone?
I was not logged in with my phone, but would you like me to? I could.
Nah, it's okay. It drives me nuts how many, I design courses based on the desktop view, but the students love to use their phones to experience the course, which makes design difficult. So I would recommend this one as well so back to Julie's question, times viewed, times participated, last activity. Yeah, this is an in-depth look at the people tab and the course activity. I just find new analytics is useful for identifying multiple students at one time who need a nudge. Whereas here, you would have to go through one by one and check everybody's activity. New analytics lets you do it. You can do multiple students at one time based on criteria you set. That would be the one benefit, I think. Question from Lisa, new analytics, does it show phone activity? Yes. Although new analytics tends to be a few days behind. It could be about 48 hours behind real-time data, and it tracks data by week. So you may find that when you first start your course in the fall, new analytics may not show you anything until the second week of class. But it's going to show you more data than the people tab will, and more accurate data. I hope I'm not confusing anyone with that.
No, you're right, Jim. I just did want to add for everybody, because it's happened to me several times. The access report will not record participations in new quizzes.
That's good to know. I find participations under the access report tend to be discussion forums.
Discussion forums or assignments, either one, yeah.
Yeah.
Or classic quizzes. Any of those will show up, but if you have new quizzes set up, new quizzes is an LTI and it does not register in the access report.
That's also good to know.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate it and hope that our tips were helpful to you.